I was told at some young age I was supposed to die, and I said no. There are compounds sitting on the shelf right now that have curative potential, but they're not being utilized. We're at war against aging and degenerative diseases. And when you're at war, there's going to be some casualties. We need to obliterate it. People are dying and reach a point where we keep almost all people alive forever.
Here with Bill Faloon, who gave a great talk. Tell us a little bit about you, how you got started. You run Life Extension. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's widely known. People can Google my name. I was told at some young age I was supposed to die, and I said no. And I couldn't figure out a way around that until I ran into some cryonicists who were freezing themselves after their death. And I said, great idea, and I made sure that was going to happen to me. But of course, none of us want to be frozen. We just want to live forever. And out of that little embryonic cryonicist group, a little bit of money put in, started our Life Extension group, where we support research aimed at delaying aging, putting it in reverse, finding ways to treat diseases better than conventional medicine. And we've been doing it for 48 consecutive years.
Wow, okay. And in that time, I know you've done a lot of your own research and trials and stuff as well. What's something that you found in that time are some of the biggest roadblocks that keep things from actually crossing that finish line? Like, we've been 5 to 10 years away from a cure to aging for probably 30 years, depending on some of the people you ask. What are those roadblocks?
The massive roadblocks involve, frankly, people trying to make a lot of money and filing patents that take long times to be issued, and therefore effective therapies sit there, sometimes never getting even into the FDA approval process. And then when that happens, there's a multi-year or multi-decade delay in FDA approving what may be a cure for a terminal disease. So we have a regulatory structure in place and a monetary structure as it relates to investments, which you think would accelerate the research. I've seen it in many cases slow it down. Partners get into disputes. Meanwhile, again, people are dying. You get that potentially effective therapy there, which is why the way we work is we don't think about patents. We don't think about who gets what. The idea is to get results, save human lives. And that doesn't necessarily generate money for us, but indirectly it does, because those people talk about their friends, and we are able to grow organically.
Okay, so more of an open source kind of thing. You just want the research out there and everyone can.
And the reason we open source is we want someone to take what we develop and improve it. So if we're able to get a complete response against a common malignancy, and someone sees that's great what you're doing, but I can make that work better, then we start to solve the cancer problem faster.
That's a great thing for everybody.
It is. And people who don't worry about cancer until they get it, that's unfortunate, because 1 out of every 2 or 3 people are going to get a serious malignancy.
Right. So you actually mentioned something I hadn't thought of before, but a lot of people filing for patents kind of jamming up the FDA approval process of good things take years or decades even to get through, if they ever do. Is that something that's because of an archaic way of regulating that just hasn't been?
It is. The regulatory process mandates you raise huge amounts of money, and you have the IP protection with a patent. So you've got to do all of that, and as a result, there are compounds sitting on the shelf right now that have curative potential, but they're not being utilized. What we need is an open society where pretty much people make their own decision as to what goes into their body based on what evidence is presented to them, and we're going to get rapid fire results. We will know what works and what fails in a matter of weeks or months, as opposed to frankly, the average 17-year delay from the time something is discovered before it becomes routine, clinically available. Routine practice, 17 years. We published that information a couple years ago, and that was published, that study, in JAMA complaining about the regulatory structure. So you got conventional medicine upset about these regulatory delays. The solution is health freedom.
Okay. And what can you say to that, and how that would affect the cost of going through trials? Because it's so expensive to get things through the FDA, and with that kind of time frame, the return on investment, people have to look at 15, 20 years instead of 3 to 5 years.
The reason it's so expensive and delayed is there are too much in the way of regulatory burdens, too many steps needing to be taken before you can even initiate a clinical trial. If we could simply inject into a country, into a civilization, the ability to let people try what appears that could work, especially if it's non-toxic. And I can give you so many examples of drugs out there right now that are totally safe when used properly, like cimetidine. That's the generic term for Tagamet. That can reduce colon cancer death rates 50%. If initiated 7 days, 5 to 7 days before surgery, continued a year later, you cut the risk of recurrence about 50%. That knowledge we brought out in 1985, but there's no money to be made on that. Someone, if they were to do a clinical trial with cimetidine, it's already out there, so they'd prove it works, and they couldn't sell it as an expensive drug. I want to create an environment where a company, instead of wanting to get a patent and own it for 17 years, milk it for a lot of money, instead moves on, okay? Make a little bit of money off that, and then move on to the next step and keep improving on what you know the best.
I see that a lot with natural things too that people use. Something maybe more effective than others, but I don't know.
Well, that's the analogy that I want to make, and that is on the dietary supplement field, there are very few patents, and as a result, companies compete fiercely to make more bioavailable forms of nutrients, to lower the cost, to figure out ways of delivering more into the bloodstream. So you don't really have a lot of patents out there with dietary supplements. You've got good chronic innovation. People having to innovate because they don't get a 17-year protection, and they don't have the FDA protecting them against competitors.
Okay, that's actually an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, do you think that a patent would induce more money to go into certain projects? And it does, some projects, others are excluded. So they sit there and don't get funding.
Okay. So by the sounds of it, we need to cut back on regulation, or at least reform it so it's easier and faster.
We need to obliterate it. People are dying. Until we reach a point where we keep almost all people alive forever, then maybe, yes, you want to bring in some regulation because some are dying. So But the regulatory system, if we're going to survive, and the loved ones that we have with diseases are going to survive, the regulatory system needs to be temporarily obliterated. Let the free market come in there and find real-world solutions. And then, that doesn't mean people could commit fraud. You can prosecute people for fraud. You can prosecute them for doing things the incorrect way that we know is incorrect. But there's a lot of good researchers out there who've got good ideas, but they can't raise the money. The reason they can't raise the money is it costs so much to go through the approval process. So we've got regulatory delays that are killing Americans and citizens of the world, frankly.
Okay, and what do you think about special economic zones and things like Singapore and finance and Dubai and cities like that have come about that are, compared to their host country, relatively
Well, I was just informed today that Singapore is not as progressive and aggressive as we'd like them to be. They're doing some good work there, but not the kind of work that's going to result in rapid-fire cures for the terminal diseases of aging. We've got so many problems with the aging process, so many potential solutions, and some places are afraid of toxicity. You have pancreatic cancer. If you're concerned about toxicity, I guess you're just not aware of what your prognosis really is.
Yeah. So the follow-up question then is, Singapore may be good for like finance and banking, not so much for medical.
They're doing good work there. There's some good work being done in the Bahamas that we're spearheading, but it's not fast enough. They still don't want it to go too fast. They're afraid of casualties. And what I'm telling people right now is we're at war against aging and degenerative diseases. And when you're at war, there's going to be some casualties. We have to accept that fact. But out of all that turmoil comes real-world treatments that can save human lives. And then those treatments are around forever. The bad stuff you never use again.
Right. So from what you've seen in the world, there's really not a zone like that, like Singapore is in finance, but for biotech and biomedical industry, there's nothing really.
Literally nothing in the world at this point in time. And you'd think some of these primitive countries would welcome it. But even they are concerned that you might have someone take an incorrect dose and have an adverse reaction. And again, we're at war. We know aging is going to kill us, and there's all kinds of diseases out there that don't have effective treatments. So we need a place where people who make their own choice to go down and have a treatment after doing their own research. And the great thing about the internet is you can look at published studies, you can look at the underlying science and have a good idea, this might be something that could work for me. I'm going to take a chance. And then we utilize the data that we gather from those people, which right now are millions of people who want to be released from regulatory tyranny, frankly, regulatory tyranny. They want the opportunity to self-experiment. And frankly, we do it with hundreds, if not thousands of people. We haven't had any casualties yet that we know of.
Okay, I think Immortalis, what we work with here, is really the boon that's going to really help with all that. It is going to be the Dubai and the Singapore of the biotech industry.
If you succeed in what you're attempting to do with the communications capabilities that are available, we could literally email you protocols that you could review, your doctors could review, patients could review, and then implement them if it makes sense, and then report back the results. So we could potentially send patients from anywhere around the world, have good, strong baseline data on their condition. They undergo experimental treatments. They come back. We test them again. We identify really quick what works, what fails. We save lives.
Well, there's an important identification there because we actually don't have our doctors. We're just providing the sandbox, that environment. And then we have like Bill Andrews and Liz Parrish with the LLI who want to come in once we have the zone established. And the people who are already established in these fields doing research would be the ones to continue. So I know you've got things you're doing. Once we have the zone, you can come in and bypass.
Well, we know many doctors who want to exit the system, and they would literally move there temporarily to practice free enterprise medicine, so to speak.
That's our role with Immortalis. We want to provide that zone where they can come in and have fast-tracked approval through FDA or bypass it totally. And then because of that, it's cheaper to go through the trials. So instead of the 17 years to go from concept to market, we're thinking more 18 months, if not less, for instead of $2 billion, just a few million. And we've seen examples of this kind of in Prospera and in Honduras, but we want to take that to another level and focus it on biomedical industry.
I know there's been some good results in Honduras. We appreciate that. It needs to be very comprehensive. We know that aging involves many, many mechanisms that we wish wouldn't occur. And so you can't leave any stone unturned. And I believe a lot of doctors would relocate to your free enterprise zone. They have the intellectual curiosity. These are doctors who really want to see patient results that are favorable. And they might take a couple years off just to see the world change in the way that we foresee.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's getting late in the night. I look forward to talking to you more about this and introducing you to the founder of Immortalis. But before we go, is there anything you would like to tell people? If they're just wanting to do this is going to help the movement.
Well, at this point, I'm going to be 71 years of age very soon. It is somewhat terrifying to be that age. I hate to tell you, you're not there yet, but it's bad. It's bad. And my risk of everything right now is very high just because of my age. And to me, the only way that we're going to achieve immortality in our lifespan, my lifespan anyway, is to abolish the regulatory structure that exists right now. And I do mean abolish, because any impediment will cause an inventor to say, oh, I don't want to fill out that paperwork. I can't afford to pay this registration fee. You keep erecting barriers and you keep then delaying treatments.
We will push our work further as fast as we can to help you with that.
And our Life Extension Group will be in full support. We'll write you up in our magazine. We'll encourage our people to reach out to you and see what they can do to help.
Great. Well,
I have one quick question. What would you say to the individuals watching you in this interview? What would you say is the number one thing that they could do to support this mission?
They should supplement with at least 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D. Probably 5,000 would be a lot more effective. That's easy, inexpensive. Metformin is an inexpensive medication. They supplement with about, I say supplement is a drug, you dose it, 850 milligrams twice a day, and reduce your risk of all kinds of diseases, slow down certain aging processes, and those are affordable by virtually anybody. We're talking about maybe $5 to $7 a month for your metformin and your vitamin D3. So, and then of course, healthy lifestyles. I mean, physical activity, the kind of foods that we know prevent disease, avoid the ones that cause disease, and we've got that nailed down pretty well. So healthy lifestyles, supplemental D3, metformin, that's where the evidence is leading us at this point in time.
Okay. What would you say is the most incredible breakthrough in longevity in your career?
At this point, we've seen different theories of aging explored. Calorie restriction has some good benefits, but there's some deficits to that too. The gene therapies that are emerging right now, and there's a lot of different ones, we are exploring the OSK transcription factors because they have the potential to systemically reprogram old cells throughout our body into younger cells, to take a 71-year-old person like myself, get me back down to a 25-year-old, and I will be a very happy person and a very healthy person.
Awesome. And is that the most passionate thing you're working on right now?
Well, yeah, at this point in time, that's where the evidence leads us. Now, all it would take is one major breakthrough somewhere else, and then we would follow that pathway. But if we can initiate the OSK primate research, which we are doing, and the primates grow younger, we translate that into humans fast. We see them growing younger. We'll also want to make sure we can cure every disease they're going to get. So that again is where that free enterprise zone could take people who are biologically young, but they contract some horrible disease. Well, again, free enterprise medicine comes in and starts to figure out ways to put it into at least a remission, if not a complete response or a cure.
Okay. And you said you're 71?
Yeah, I'm turning 71. I cannot tell you again how horrific that is. I wake up with nightmares that I'm 56, and then it gets worse. I realize I'm 71, and it's a terrible situation. And I do a lot to be biologically younger. I'm probably 14 biological years younger by the standard measures being used today. Doesn't mean, though, I won't get a malignancy tomorrow or heart attack the next day. I mean, I just have good data to support I'm healthier than a typical 71-year-old, but a typical 71-year-old is not very healthy.
Right. And so what are, like, you do not look 70 at all. So what is it like, what would you say is contributing to your looks?
I experiment with virtually everything that's ever been proposed to slow aging, reverse certain aging factors. So there's not a single intervention that I can say has enabled me to have people say you don't look your age. I do know I am that age, and I know if I wasn't engaged in what I'm doing, I probably would have had some major cardiovascular events occur. But if you look at my blood test results, they would probably outbeat almost anyone who is 21 years of age. But again, that does not make me 21, but it reduces my risk of cardiovascular events, malignancies, dementia, etc.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, we look forward to talking to you further, some discussion off camera, and keep going.
Fantastic work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Bill.